Miss Rich put her paper copy of Human Bloodlust on the table, and one of her students asked a question. "Excuse me, can you ask me again? Is there a reason why people are so cruel?" The golden-skinned man asked, wearing a mask etched with floral patterns as he rested his forearms on the table. "You have been fighting their wars, famous murders, coups, and Demir's deportation. However, are there any reasons?" Miss Rich took a deep breath. She could see the same concerns in their eyes and hoped they would listen closely to her short history lesson. "This is a difficult question to answer because it is so simple," Miss Rich said as she took one of the new factory memory cache cards and attached it to the data screen on the wall. "Humanity may not be the most violent species among the stars. I believe that title belongs to the Demir, but they are by far the most violent people in the Federation." The exhibit came to life, showing a pair of male human toddlers fighting with sticks. The Kryn and Ya likely evolved as predators, but they don't seem to possess the same predatory drive that has permeated human society. In our current state, predation has become a means to an end rather than a necessity. There's very little historical evidence to suggest that Kak and Orya derive pleasure from their survival tactics. Despite having evolved as predators, they can become extremely remorseful when forced to take their lives, even in the most dire situations. They are lovers of strange-looking plants. "Aren't they carnivores?" Lena asked, her long neck adorned with costume jewelry. She heard someone chuckle quietly. "They've had some trouble growing human peppers recently, and now they're black market oligarchs dealing in seeds, still coping with the loss of their livestock. Because of a simple mistake, they created grazing statues of the animals every morning." Miss Rich said this with a smile as she moved behind her table, smoothing her sweater. "But that's beside the point. What I need to tell you is one of the reasons why many members of the Cinderella Confederation are still wary of humanity. Some are even afraid of them, despite being on our side." In response, Lamela closed the classroom door and drew the blinds. The older man raised his butter-yellow eyebrows but remained silent, simply closing the door and pulling down the barred window. "People," Miss Rich began as Lamela sat down again, removing her fluffy tail from the chair, "are complicated creatures. Charming and vivacious, they can be the most loyal friends you will ever know. However, beneath that charm lies darkness." She gestured to the children fighting on the screen. "Humans are deeply obedient biological warriors. Even at a young age, they kick, hit, or try to fight their parents. They wield imitation weapons at only 3 years old." Jean, the masked man, bowed his head and asked, more curious than warning, "Why do they do that? Aren't children supposed to be cared for, tender, wrapped in soft clothes, and left to grow peacefully?" Karsheetan shrugged. "We at Karleni are all familiar with biting when we're young, but it's more of a love bite if anything, despite not having teeth. Even babies can pack an impressive punch for their size," Miss Rich said as she turned the slide to show a line of male and female children forming a giggling skirmish line, wearing dustbin lids and cardboard helmets. This photo was taken by a visitor from PO who traveled through some of Earth's cities. He observed that these children were engaging in mock battles and practicing work in formations. When he ventured into a dense forest area, he encountered people practicing with guns and other sticks, rehearsing tactical movements in the woods. "Why teach children these things? Children are supposed to grow up in an environment free of war, developing in peace," asked the Ural female from the front, her black fur glistening in the light. "Strangely, they are not," Miss Rich replied, frowning. "They learn these things simply by observation and instinctively try to imitate them. Human children are attracted to these activities. Of course, even humans don't fully understand why they call this game rough and tumble, but most agree that it's extremely beneficial for their development." Before more questions could arise, Miss Rich continued, "Yes, many human cultures encourage their children to play and separate them before things get too out of hand. Human parents believe this is the foundation for knowing when to stop, as well as teaching decency and manners." Mrs. Rich tapped her fingers lightly, and the next image appeared on the screen. The real question many of us are asking is why Earth is considered a dead world and whether this inherent violence is tied to the planet or to the life it supports. Thousands of years of warfare have honed humanity into the perfect predator, capable of tearing, rending, and killing when necessary. And the worst part is that these skills have side effects. Gene crossed his arms and asked, "Could these be a side effect of their inability to kill easily?" With a quick tap on her palm, Miss Rich pulled up an image filled with photos of infamous serial killers. They kill for pay, it's a profession. Very few serial killers exist among Federation races. They are usually labeled as mentally weak and are quickly dealt with. Tink, another black-haired Ural, pricked his ears. "Yes, Miss Rich. How many assassins did your nation have 500 years ago?" Dingley closed his eyes to think, then raised his head. 3 or 4, I think." 4 is correct, Miss Rich replied. "How many did the Ryans have in the same time frame?" Miss Rich asked. 17, Cendric replied, tapping his paws on the table. Miss Rich sighed and folded her hands. "I believe we had 10 at that time, the last one being over 30 years ago after the Confederate Station massacre." Miss Rich continued this pattern of questioning, pointing out that each race had an extremely small number of serial killers among its people. When she finished, Miss Rich crossed her arms over her chest. "This is because we are not naturally murderous species. Yes, we all have our issues from time to time, but in the last 500 years we can't be labeled as bloodthirsty." The silence that followed was eerie. Now, you might be asking yourself why humans would kill like this. Yes, there are cases referring to mental breakdowns or other issues, as even our brains can short-circuit from time to time. But you might find it strange that during the war with the Dimir, these issues decreased among humans. Kin raised one forearm and winced as Miss Rich, surreptitiously tapping her fingers on her palm, displayed images of humans and insects fighting hand-to-hand. As humans were attacked by enemies who fought for what they believed was good or just, they experienced an almost 70% reduction in serial murders and a host of mental and stress-related problems. In fact, many cross-consortium researchers believe that general human sentiment has improved significantly. A male optician leaned back in his chair and looked up at the screen. "They did?" he asked. Miss Rich nodded. "Yes. Without a war to wage, they turned against each other, leading to an increase in random killings and mental health issues. When the Federation stepped in, humans united against a common goal, releasing their frustrations." Tinto ran his clawed paw along his head. "Oh, I get it now. I think you all will understand this very soon," he said. Miss Rich muttered, "Earth, this little blue marble we're tossing around in this station breeds the best predators you'll ever encounter. Predators who have been finely tuned over tens of thousands of years and even during peace hunt and kill other predators. They've always adhered to this approach, legitimate predators hunting down unfair ones who prey on others. A darkness that slowly seeps out of them from mental illness, boredom, or a simple desire to kill. My colleagues and I have identified 3 main types of people." Miss Rich tapped her fingers along her palm, and images of 3 people appeared on the display. One was a grieving but defiant mother. "Look at her face," Miss Rich instructed. The next image was of a human soldier with a long scar on his cheek. The last was a smiling woman wearing a strange orange jumpsuit. "First, there is the instinctual killer," Miss Rich began. "The sorrow of these people can drive them to kill, even if they aren't naturally inclined to do so. If their child or loved one is in danger, they erupt with wild, feral energy. Afterward, they may suffer mentally, but most eventually recover, which seems to be the norm." "I would have assumed that the majority of humanity falls into this category," the male optician said, lightly tapping his fingernail on the display. "Less than you might think, but yes, most do," Miss Rich mused, then pointed to the soldier. "These types of people are considered actual predators and are trained killers. They don't relish it, but they can easily kill once protocols are violated. Regardless of what we think, they live by a fairly simple set of rules. They don't kill unless provoked. But once those rules are broken, they have no qualms about exterminating life and won't lose sleep over it. The room was silent until the female Odin slowly raised her paw. What kind of transgression could cause them to harm innocent people? She asked. Miss Rich, her mind recalling passages from human philosophy books, stated, "Those who have fought on the battlefield against the Dimir or faced oppressive regimes. There are many ways to bring out the worst in them. It seems their wrath knows no bounds. We, on the other hand, can forgive and move on. They, however, hold grudges forever and will even hunt down the offspring of those who wronged them, considering them legitimate targets." The students sat quietly, reflecting on the lesson. Miss Rich could see the concern and understanding in their eyes, knowing that this glimpse into human nature was eye-opening for them. Even worse, these rogue predators can hide anywhere. "What do you want to say?" Miss Reiki, a blue opticon, asked. Miss Reiki drummed her nails along the top of her desk, thinking over the words with pursed lips, then stood back up fully onto her feet. "The reason why the Confederation is so scared of humans now after the war and why you are in this class with no humans present is that they want to arm you with knowledge. People are mostly good. They are kind people with big hearts and give a lot of love, but they have a shadow that hangs over them day and night. Justice, cannibals, and unscrupulous cannibals lurk in plain sight. It is estimated that there are hundreds of thousands of thieves out there, or so clever that they haven't even been discovered yet. It is estimated that there are millions of court predators walking among you, and a simple mistake can lead them down a path of bloodshed. The beauty of the earth has produced two of the most perfect predators to grace the stars, and their ferocity is unmatched. Most frightening is how calm they are when they go about their business, so why not get rid of them? Why not go through with you and other psychic races and eradicate the problem?" Littlebit asked, her full blue eyes narrowing. They could not hide the truth within them, and Miss Ricky grinned despite her melancholy eyebrows. "You might think so, but they are hiding there like on the sidewalk. People are immune to mental blocks, and they understand them immediately. The smarter people at Rogue even provided false clues that led us on a hilarious chase. A larger team of investigators tried, only to find themselves outmatched by even the reluctance people, shutting them out like a slammed door. This made the association so frightened that many began to wonder. If we had accidentally opened a box that we cannot close again, the thing hidden inside would explode and wrap around us. What should we do? What should you understand? What goes with you? Who eats with you? And who are you talking to?" Miss Ricky began, but the dull sound of a bell rang through the room and she sighed. "We will continue with the class, and when the class exit is over, everyone grabs their shoulder bags or crossbody bags, slings them over their shoulders, and collects their files from the classroom." Roar frowned in thought as Tinnell's shoulder bumped against hers, snapping her out of her thoughts. "I figured it out." Tinnell huddled smugly next to Lamela, and Karen rolled her eyes as she slid past Lamela, wondering what that strange smell we were both smelling was. In yesterday's lesson on Demir's War, Dentella jokingly responded with a palm to her chest. "It was all on her sweater, and I knew what it was." Ramiel blinked, not reacting the way the other Joel wanted him to, just waiting for her to blurt out. Ed and Tingle were tired of waiting. Human Rummel raised his eyebrows, not too interested but very curious, "But from what I heard from my sister, their scent was everywhere." "How do you know it wasn't sold by someone in a store?" "It also smells like humans." Smelled like a man's canned food, and he said in a frustrated roar, which means that what Ramir smiled means that the traitor must be humans. "Agreed," G. Tinnell muttered, feeling a bit down after Ramiel refused to admit what she found out about your sister. "Oh, she was still playing with people. I think she said something about pine cones or something." "Sounds like fun," though Ramirez said he's opening up the ground and chewing gum from the foil wrapper. "Our parents sent me some points to buy him. Some new boots or something. I'll come down over the weekend and see how she giggles and maybe put some bandages on her or some reactive therapy pads." Fallon fell face-first into the fighting pit, and after a brief break rolling in the rag doll like the sun shining on her, dark yellow fur and protective gear flew from her body. "Oh, Himmel," hissed, raising his bare fist to his chin. "I know that doesn't feel good." Zayton grunted in his throat and turned to Himmel. "She was kicked out." Flynn groaned and slowly knelt down. "Take the boxer, stand back up, and pull the helmet over your head." She fought Renee today, who, despite looking pretty normal, beat her. The human had an impressive way of shifting her body weight, but an examination of her entire body led her to believe that most of the weight was in her chest. "Come back with a furry back." You come to Renee screaming and spinning the rotation. Her corset, stick drill, and Chinese /T will let you leave easily. "Nothing. This is easy." Flynn murmured and wiped some sand, fell off her face, and returned to her feet completely. In this training, she saw people dominate in other games. They were torn apart by their own gender equivalents, and various buildings were increasingly built. At least Carolyn's are adapting, and people seem to enjoy arguing with them. "I can't wait for the Golden Man to join us," Fran yelled, bringing the pugil back into guard, "and it would be illusory to watch them wipe the smiles off your faces." Renee and the other people laughed. "Anyway, they're not here yet, and you have to hit me 6 times to get past Farron. Look at the other winners in her game. They all look up to her. None of them got through, and she had to work for them to win." Flynn nodded. "Then slowly back away from the fight." Renee's attack was very fast, and Flynn barely dodged the blow. Her fist hit Renee in the stomach, and her ear was hit painfully by Renee's boxers as she coughed. 4 fingers extended towards Fran, and 2 more. Himmel yelled as he toppled over the wooden planks that formed the ring of the battle pit, and Zayton looked at the other Karen. "I discovered that I was right in assuming that we would have an easier time. I think they stuffed pit pads in our tail to help the other car get extra guns," Lakin said with a chuckle. The real Zayton laughed as well and turned in time to see Fran hitting Renee over the head. 5, the humans called out, but the strike was deeply angered. Renee spun her pugil stick around and lunged towards Fran at speed, and Fran's guard was easily broken by the swift uppercut, sending the Ural staggering backwards with faltering steps before she crashed to the sand. Again. When Flynn moaned from GRO to the ground, all people screamed painfully, and her tail gave little when she groaned on the beach. Renee, "Hey man," the private, trembling at the sight, waved his fingers back and forth trying to find his fist club. Renee laughed reproachfully at that. "She hit me, and she should hit you in a possible place." He said that, then crossed his hands. "You are told not to punch them in the face." Renee went to yell at Boxer, who was human but a friend. A rebound was glued to her back, and she looked very confused. "You returned to the enemy. She asked you to die," Renee spit out and threw her pugil on the ground. He turned me away, and all the noise died down as Headmistress Marshall emerged from her private hiding place and gave her way, her brown sports cap glinting in the sunlight. "You allowed yourself to be distracted while Eeple continued on with the task." Director Marshall put his hands on his hips and looked at Flynn. "Your lack of discipline got you shot in the back, Sergeant Marshall." "During the drill," Fran smiled as blood poured from her nose and mouth. "You're bleeding, Drill Sergeant," Marshall said matter-of-factly to Flynn, still smiling and nodding at Flynn. "Drill Sergeant, you also knocked down a human in close combat. How does it feel?" Drill Sergeant Marshall, "Like my face?" asked, honestly said, and then the sand spit on the blood. Instructor Marshall laughed, then reached out and pulled Fran to her feet. "You always impress me, expert friend, blah blah." Schimmel clapped his hands to signify the promotion. She was just raised. Himmel ran on the ring. He raised his hands and circled another upgraded Yoel, who cheered. Shemuel screamed again, walked around the ring, and started punching Zahn on the arm. "She did it. She is the first non-human promotion." Zayton quickly, tired of the slapping, whacked Heaven with his still pugil pad carrying tail. "Be quiet." Himmelage Pro promoted Fryn asked, her mind still buzzing with uppercut as Drill Sergeant Marshall studied her. Why did the instructor Marshall smile at her for showing the correct medal? But the person immediately let out a loud cry and caught the rest of the race. Sergeant Marshall half turned to look at the conscripts, Steel Soul and Iron Heart, and they all nodded. So even when the front of the fight pulled the black metal ring and took the steel protection, half of the population was still confused. That is, the Chinese priest said. Delete the old French level from her right flange and place the new level on the fabric so that it keeps the Iron Heart and cannot blink during drilling. Soldiers. Then she caused the pain, pulled out the flange, pulled out the needle from body gymnastics, laughed, and then placed a guard on the official and put the guards on her body. Now he shouted his son's prank at Sergeant Marshall, pushing the still hissing and spitting son toward the other enlisted men, Steel and Iron. They screamed with shrill cheers and raised the still cursing hairstyle in the air as the other races clapped and whistled at her.